He's an old head.
Youngins are really starting to get on my damn nerves.
He's a purveyor of nonsense. He's a Georgia high school coaching job influencer. His favorite Bible verse is, Jesus wept. He's the man of constant sorrow, Chris Lamb.
Yeah.
Welcome to Sun Coaches Podcast, and we're at the NIKE Coach of the Year Clinic in Washington, D.C., and today we've got Coach LaQuentin Taylor. He's the special teams coordinator at Lagrange College. He's actually a Georgia guy. He graduated from Northwest Whitfield, and out of high school, he chose a totally different path than most everybody else. He served our country in the United States Navy. Coach, so good to have you today.
Thank you, Coach. Thanks for having me. Yeah, you're right. Out of high school, I was kind of a self-aware kid. I had the opportunity to go to Middle Tennessee to play football, but I also knew I was going to go party as soon as I got some freedom. So, so instead of wasting my parents' time and money, I said I didn't want to work in the carpet mills in Dalton. I felt like I was too good for that, but I also knew me going off to college right out of high school, because my parents kind of kept that thumb down on me that I was going to have some freedom and
Probably wasn't going in with.
Yeah, so I was self-aware. So instead, I was still 17, but I went to the Navy recruiter's office in our local mall there in Dalton and did everything I could. You know, didn't even tell my parents I was going. Told my dad one night at church, hey, by the way, I'm joining the Navy. He thought it was cool. He started crying because, he's kind of sensitive. But
sounds like my dad.
But for him, he was a Navy vet.
That's
my
awesome.
grandfather was an Army vet. My aunt, before she passed away, she was in the Army for 30 years. I mean,
Military's in your family.
Military is actually in my family a lot. So it was kind of easy for me. And it was a route that nobody really thought, because everybody just knew I was going to go to college because, I was kind of smart, I thought.
Right.
So, but instead, I joined the Navy after graduation. Since I was 17, had both my parents in town. So that Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, my recruiter is at my house, and we're signing out every bit of paper that we can, because at that point now, I'm ready to go. But I ended up going to boot camp exactly 2 months after graduation. But that was
at Great Lakes.
Great mistakes. Great. If you've ever been there, it's Great Lakes, Illinois, where I went to boot camp and hospital corpsman school.
And what did you? Oh, hospital corpsman.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I was going to ask what your job was in the Navy.
Yeah.
And I remember you told me last night that you were in the Navy for 5 years.
5 years, yes.
And was only on a boat.
One day. One day. I was there. It was a training session. I was there on a Thursday at 2 o'clock, and I was back on land by Friday at 2 o'clock.
And wasn't mad about it.
Wasn't upset about it one bit.
Not one bit.
I could still see land from the boat, so I was fine.
Being a mountain kid,
Yeah,
you were
right.
probably like,
I was like, I'm fine out here, but I'll be okay going back.
So while you were in the Navy, you were able to get your degrees and whatever you needed to do. And did you always know that you wanted to coach, or was that something you just?
So, even while I was when I was at Camp Lejeune Marine Corps Base, they had a rec department, and they would ask, hey, you guys, anybody that wants to come kind of help take a team. So me and a couple buddies coached a team, and it was fun. We had a good time, coaching a bunch of middle school, military kids in rec football. Didn't really think anything of it. Got out of the Navy because, God told me, hey, you're going to change the world. You've done what you needed to do. You're going to change the world. And I was like, cool, get out. God, you didn't tell me how I was going to change the world. so, I ended up going to work at the local hospital, because utilizing my military background, I was able to do that. And then, so I coached a little rec ball here and there, nothing. I coached one of my coworkers, 4-year-old, in flag football. I don't wish that on anybody. It was
like
fun.
herding cats.
Yeah, it's like herding wet cats. But no, so one day my dad's in the grocery store, and one of the guys that was our announcer for football when I was in high school, he's on the school board. So he sees my dad in the grocery store, and he's like, hey, is your son interested in coaching high school football? We're about to open up a new school. My dad's like, yeah, he wants to do it. Okay. So he calls me later. He's like, hey, you got an interview at Coahella Creek High School that was opening in 2011 in Dalton.
The Colts.
The Colts, yeah. And I was like, okay. I never really thought about it. So I'm working at the hospital one day, and my phone rings. It's the head coach, Coach Hamlin, one of my favorite people in the world now. He's like, hey, I want to set you up for an interview to come up here. What day are you free? I was like, okay. So I tell him a day. I go over there. And he's like, oh, what's your coaching experience? I was like, a little bit of rec ball. A little bit of rec ball. And I was like, okay. So, eventually he ends up naming me the running backs coach and linebackers coach, new school, small staff. And I went from, I'm a guy, I'm coaching with Coach Hamlin, who's been a head coach down in Florida. Coach Chip Fleming, who's been a defense coordinator. Coach Fleming, his dad, who's been around forever. And then there's me. So I'm sitting there, I'm like...
the Navy vet who was coaching wet cats.
Right. And I'm like, okay. So I'm listening and I'm trying to learn from these guys. And I'm sitting in these meetings on Sundays and we're starting at 2, ending at like 8. I was like, I didn't sign up for this crazy stuff. What are we doing?
What are we doing?
Like, what are we doing? Why can't we figure this out in an hour? Well, I did it in rec ball. I just watched a little film. I had to figure it. Yeah. Then I learned that coaching high school ball is a lot like herding wet cats that have opinions. so just learning that. And then, my career just kind of took off from there. So I go from being the quiet kid in the corner to now I run my own meeting rooms and you can't shut me up. So, and and along there, in between there, I became a defensive coordinator when I met Coach Wesley Tankersley, another
good dude.
Phenomenal dude.
Yes.
Like, excuse me, he is a mentor to me. Like, I love Coach Tank, love his family. Same for Coach Fleming. Like, some of my closest friends and people that are cheering me on in the corner, that they know where I came from.
Right.
He gave me an opportunity when he left Ridgeland to go to Stevens County. He's like, hey, come be my defensive coordinator. And he really just started molding me,
So you went to Stevens County?
I went to Stevens.
Coahella.
Well, so I left Coahella and went to Northwest Whitfield, where I graduated from. So I got to coach with Josh Robinson, another just
Josh is good
dude.
Good people. I've known him for 24 years. He used to work the Hodges camp, the offensive line camp, and I remember I saw him at a recruiting fair at Ahmad Tinker's recruiting fair, at Tink's recruiting fair, the FRE, and we sat right next to each other. And we both looked at each other and we were like, man, we both aged horribly. Because we remember when we were young.
Right.
But he's good people.
Listen, Coach Robinson, another guy that I know if I need anything, I can pick up the phone and call him. I've been blessed along my coaching journey to just coach with some really, really good people. And they were great coaches as well, but they were just better people. Like, just continued to help me, show me how to be a good man and a good person, and then how to be a good coach. So I was able to do that. So I'll go to Northwest Whitfield with Coach Robinson for a couple years. Then I go to Ridgeland with Coach Tank. And that was a 2017 team we had at Ridgeland, Coach. We were loaded with a bunch of dudes that did not look like football players. Like, they weren't big at all. But my entire secondary was probably about 4 or 5. They all ran the 4x1 100 team relay team together. Had a couple Division I guys.
Wasn't getting beat deep.
No, Coach. We were in man coverage all year long, and Coach, we were averaging, I think, about 5 points a game.
Which for North Georgia school, for those of you out there that aren't familiar with Georgia, North Georgia is not traditionally known for having a bunch of 4 or 5 guys.
No.
Not a whole secondary's worth of 4 or 5.
I mean, like, I knew we were going to be good when we were doing a 7-on-7 that summer. We were going against Cartersville, who had this kid named Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if anybody's heard of him.
Oh yeah,
he was pretty decent.
He wasn't bad.
No, he was all right.
Yeah, he was all right.
He's all right. Turned out okay. But we're playing them in a 7-on-7, and Coach, they had D1 kids everywhere. I mean, we're talking not like what some of these kids today think they're D1. We're talking legit D1. Miller Forrestall going to Alabama, Trevor Lawrence. They had some other guys that were like went major D1 school, and here we are with our little North Georgia kids. We roll out there. We don't look like much. Coach, we're going toe-to-toe with them.
I bet y'all had some stories with them kids up there.
Oh, Coach, it's ridiculous. So the best one of the best kids there was Markeith Montgomery. Coach, that kid to this day will still text me, Coach, hope you're having a good day. Happy Easter. Happy birthday. You know, great kid. He goes to Kennesaw State. They move him from corner to safety, outside linebacker, back to safety. He ends up being their career interceptions leader by the time he leaves. Like, kid is phenomenal. He'll have a chance in the draft this year, hopefully to get drafted. If not, he'll get picked up for sure as an undrafted guy. And he's just a good kid. Like, even to this day, just a humble kid, just one of the nicest kids. You know, my wife and I, we call him our other kid. You know, we got several kids along the way that, you know, we were able to just build those relationships with. That's the one thing I've learned is if you don't have relationships with these kids, they're not going to do nothing for you. No. So
no, you scrap
you
that.
can cancel that. So,
yeah.
So you better start building relationships with these kids, and that's, you know.
Kids are a lot more forgiving than people believe.
Yes.
I mean, as long as you're real or based or whatever the word they're using these days,
I can't keep
they'll look past the fact that you don't know a whole lot.
Right.
But if you love on them and care about them and you're honest with them, as long as you're genuine,
they'll
you're
do
there
it for
them. They'll look over the fact that you screw up a coverage call, or or you mess up something. There, we got you, Coach. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. You're good. Appreciate it, guys. So, but
they make us look good.
Yeah. So that's why I say, you know, I've been the best coach when I had better players. So, you know, I mean, when I had some average players, I was kind of an average coach, and that's okay. But the big thing has always been building that relationship with the kids. You know, whether they were the Markeith Montgomerys who's going to go D1 or another kid that may not ever play another down in football after high school. Build that same relationship. You know, and that's the one thing I feel like has been more rewarding than pretty much anything I've done in my life is just watching these kids just grow into great men. And for them to send me a text, say, hey, Coach, I appreciate you. Doesn't matter what many games I've won, lost, that matters so much more.
Yeah, we were talking, saw on Twitter right around Christmas time or whatever, and people were taking pictures of, old heads like me were taking pictures of guys that came back. Mm-hmm. You know, hey, this guy was back in town from Christmas or whatever, and I got to see him. What a pleasure. And I don't think the kids understand, you know, how much that means to us.
Absolutely.
You know, because unlike any other job, which you've been in the Navy,
yep.
and you had a real job, and we don't build things.
Correct.
We don't fix cars. We don't run numbers. We're not accountants. We don't get to immediately see the result of our work. We don't get to see the result of our work until 5, 10 years down the road.
Plus, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's the crazy thing. And I think that was the one thing I didn't really realize when I was a young coach is, man, I was like, man, we didn't win. And I was so frustrated because we didn't win. But I didn't realize that the real prize was 5 years. 6 years ago, or after.
That kid getting that degree.
When that kid says, hey, Coach, I'm getting married. I want you to come to my wedding.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Like, man, then when that first happened to me, I was like, oh, man, this is cool. Because, my wife and I joke about it all the time. She's like, I'm kind of jealous of you because you have an instant impact on people. And it's something that's going to be longevity. What she does when working in the restaurant, she's impacting their belly. But that's about it. She's not impacting anybody. Mm-hmm. And, and she tells me she's jealous of me all the time. And I'm like, I just do this. This is what I enjoy. But like you said, I haven't worked a day since 2011.
So when you left
Ridgeland.
You went with Coach Tank.
Went with Coach Tanksley to Stevens County. And it was culture shock because you leave from Northwest Georgia, Dalton, which is kind of country but city still.
Because Chattanooga's where you would go to go get stuff.
Absolutely. But then you go over to Toccoa, Georgia. You got to drive off a road to get to a different road. There's a Walmart there, but, you don't go there after a certain time. But it was a culture shock. But I'm going to tell you, those people in Toccoa love football. Love football. I still follow a lot of them on Facebook and Twitter. I still talk to some people every now and then. Of course, I talk to Coach Tank as often as I can. But that was when I truly locked in as a coach. By that time, I was truly locked in. I was fully bought in. Like, I knew this is what I wanted to do. And then my wife gets a job in Orlando. And this is right in that 2020, that COVID time. So she's like, hey, I'm going to take this job in Orlando. It pays pretty good money. And I looked at the money I was making and the money she was going to make. And I said, we probably need to go to Orlando.
You win.
Yeah, you win. So then and it was hard. It was very, very hard because I grew to love Coach Tank, his entire family, the community of Stevens County. Like, I just figured that was where we were going to be. But again, God has his own plans for us.
Right.
And so, you just kind of roll with it. And it ended up actually being probably the absolute best thing for me. So we get down to Orlando, and I'm looking at BSN's like, okay, you know what? I'm probably going to get out of coaching. Let's go make some more money because Florida's a little more expensive, and I knew they didn't pay very well. And BSN wouldn't even talk to me. They said, you don't know enough people down here. I was like, yes, I'm good. It's COVID. Nobody knows anybody right now. So, but then I started looking. Coach Porch at Mount Dora at the time, he had just taken the job, and he's like, hey, going to be the defense coordinator at Mount Dora High School. It's like, all right. So I do a little research. If you ever go to Mount Dora, Florida, you're going to have the time of your life. It's probably the most beautiful small town I've ever been in. You got to come off some country roads in Florida, come in it, and then boom, there's a city, and then boom, you're out. So it's 2 traffic lights and you're done. So, but the downtown it's a little older, one of the oldest cities in Florida. It's beautiful. Had the time of my life coaching down there. We were not very good. I thought I had a good defensive game plan put together, and then we'd immediately give up 40. And I was like, it's fine, guys. Whatever.
They were good boys.
They were really good kids. We couldn't stop. We couldn't stop anything. So, but I'm there. But by this time, I'm in year 9 coaching, and I kind of have that itch. That, hey, I think I want to run my own program. Mm-hmm. And I talked to Coach Porch, and he and I sat and talked a long time about it. So then there's a couple jobs come open, so I go put my little resume together and get an interview at Space Coast High School. And I thought I did terribly. Very first head coaching interview, I thought I just bombed it. But eventually I talked to the county AD who was in there. He's like, no, Coach, you knocked it out of the park. He said, you just didn't have any experience. I was like, well, that made me feel better. So then another opportunity came. I was more relaxed this time. So South Lake High School down in Groveland, Florida, same county as Mount Dora. They were looking for a head coach. The head coach retired. So I just threw my name out there. I was like, whatever. Let's see. At this point, I'm like, I'm just going to stay at Mount Dora and, whatever happens. I've kind of had that experience now, but whatever. Well, they called me in for an interview. So I go interview. But during this time, I'm also helping coach baseball. Well, our softball coach gets suspended. So they're like, hey, will you coach softball? No, I'm at Mount Dora. I was like, yeah. Well, I go in for my interview for South Lake. Guess who we're playing the next night in softball? South Lake High School. So we're in there, we're in my interview, we're talking about that. Well, next thing I know, the next day I look up, the principal and AD are at the softball game. It's a softball away game. They're not going to be there. First off, Mount Dora, we were not very good at softball. South Lake, they had a bunch of sophomores who were just phenomenal. That group ends up playing for a state championship the next year, and probably would have played for one the next year if they didn't run into the team that won the state championship. So I knew, I was like, okay, if they're both here and they speak to me after the game, I'm getting a second interview. So I'm kind of just waiting for the call. The next week they say, hey, we want you to come in for a second interview. All right. So I put my little shirt and tie on and go bebopping in there and just be myself. Like I said, I'm relaxed sitting in this interview. The basketball coach was on the panel. He says, Coach, you seem real nice. You know, you got a good personality. He said, do you got any bite to you? I said, well, I yell and scream when I need to yell and scream. But I've come to realize these kids, they don't really respond to that very much anymore. Now, when I first started in 2011, you could get after them. But in 2020, 2021, nah, bud. It's different kids. So, you know, I ended up getting the job at South Lake, and that was a whirlwind. So I'm actually sitting in a real estate class in Florida on a Saturday. My phone rings. It's South Lake High School. Why they called me on a Saturday? Because they're offering me the job. I'm sitting in the middle of this real estate class. So I go out. I was like, guys, I can't pay attention to this anymore. I just got offered a head coaching job at high school. So I call my wife, you know, we're excited. And then, so I go meet with the AD the next day on a Sunday. He's like, yeah, we want you to start spring practice tomorrow. Okay.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. Okay. All right. Let's make it happen. So, you know, I get my stuff together. I call some of the guys that are on staff and, you know, meet with them on that same Sunday and say, all right, I'm going to keep you and you and you. And this is how we're going to roll for spring practice. I said, everybody's on an interview basically for these next couple weeks. You know, you guys already know the kids. I'm going to tell you what we want to install. This is what we're going to do. So I'm learning kids on the first day after my introductory meeting. And then 2 hours later, we're on the practice field. And in my mind, this is how it goes as a head coach. So let's just roll with it like we're going to roll. And enjoyed 2 years there at South Lake. We weren't very successful, but that time taught me so much. Again, I'm learning everywhere I go. I'm learning something. So I stepped down at South Lake after 2 years just because I knew it was not the right fit for me. Mm-hmm. So then I accepted a job down at Somerset Academy in Pembroke Pines. This is in April. I go down there. Doing good. You know, we end up having some spring practice. We play Pahokee in the spring game that gets rain shortened. And, oh, by the way, we don't have lights and security's leaving at 5 o'clock. Y'all didn't tell me that part?
What are we doing?
Guys, we can't just stop a game. Now, mind you, Pahokee's got some really good athletes. We've got some pretty good athletes, but some really young athletes. But, you know, I wanted to play, you know, I wanted to see kind of where we were at as a program. So that game gets canceled with about 6 minutes left in the first quarter. So I effectively coached offense and defense for the spring game because they did not have any staff whatsoever. So I was like, again, it's fine. We're going to make it through. And then I get a call like 2 weeks later. Get a call from a guy at Alderson Broaddus University. They have a sprint football team. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I do kind of want to get in college. So I pray on it, talk to my wife about it, and we pray up some more, talk to my dad about it, talk to some of my other guys about it. And so we decide to, you know, that's the best step is go into the college rank because these opportunities don't just happen all the time.
Right.
And then, so I take off, I drive from Fort Lauderdale to Philippi, West Virginia.
That's a long drive.
Yep. It's a very long drive. And I drove by myself. So it was a very long and very boring drive because my wife was actually working in Atlanta. So I'm just driving, bebopping along. And again, I'm leaving 95-degree Fort Lauderdale. And I get to Philippi, West Virginia. It's like 72 and beautiful. All right. I can live with summers like this.
Yeah.
But then lo and behold, I'm there 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and we're in a meeting planning our fall camp. And we get a message saying, hey, there's a meeting at 3:00 about the school. And we knew the school was working through some financial troubles, but we were assured that we're going to be fine. Well, during this meeting, we're all sitting around listening to it. They're shutting the school down, the state, because apparently the school hasn't paid bills. Apparently you got to pay bills.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're sitting around and we're listening, and I'm like, I know how this works. I get on footballscoop.com and I'm like, who needs a coach? Because I'm asking myself, okay, if I'm supposed to be in college, why is this happening, right? Or am I supposed to go back to high school? And something said, you'll find a college. So I'm looking through Football Scoop and I see Lagrange College is needing offensive coaches and defense coach. I sent my resume to both of them, offense coordinator and defense coordinator. I just knew, I said, okay, I've got family in Lagrange, from the Lagrange area. So let me just see. Coach, they called me the next morning. They needed coaches and I needed a place to coach. So it was really a good match. So they only had a few coaches, and they were like, well, when can y'all get down here? Well, I brought the guy that was our defensive coordinator, going to be the D-line coach, and wide receiver coach. So we all three kind of trekked down, and we go down the next week. Kids come back 2 days later, a day later. We're rolling in fall camp at Division III Lagrange College. And that's what I realized. I didn't know nothing about coaching. So, but no, I mean, this last year at Lagrange has been just a beautiful, just kind of culmination of teaching and learning how to be a coach.
Right.
I thought I knew a lot. And again, I learned some things as being a head coach and learned some things as being a coordinator, and then learned some things being that quiet guy back at Kahala. To again, now I'm running my own meeting rooms. So I started out coaching the defensive backs, but then our D-line coach got sick, so I had to take over because, again, I've coached multiple positions. So they were like, hey, can you jump down to D-line? Absolutely. Well, I felt like we increased our sack rate. We stopped the run a little better. So perfect, match made in heaven, great. But during this whole time, I'm also the special teams coordinator, and preparing for special teams in high school is a little different than preparing for special teams in college.
Yeah, I was mad.
So just the amount of work I put in just on kick return was completely different. But now it's also made me see the game a little differently as well. So.
Well, that's awesome, Coach. I mean, just the journey, serving our country, obviously having a very faith-based approach to your career. Moving up the ladder, doing it the right way, just opportunities that you grasped a hold of, and going to 2 different states, which is always intriguing to me. And then the opportunity to move up to college, I can't wait to see what your career unfolds and what it turns into.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Coach. Listen, going to West Virginia was never on my life plan. I mean, because I've traveled, being in the military, I've traveled all over the world. I've traveled being a coach, and then, hey, come to West Virginia. But I'll tell you, had that school not closed down, I'd still been in West Virginia.
Well, that's awesome, Coach. You never know. You may end up at West Virginia down the road sometime.
That's right.
Coach, I sure do appreciate you being on today. Look forward to keeping up with you. Let me know if there's ever anything I can do for you.
Appreciate it, Coach. Thank you so much.